Starting next week, I will be working exclusively for the locations to orbit on my show. And eventually, when I'm able to get my gigs, they'll open it up to audience from stereo patients. And from there, producing.
See? Now you're in a like the
Getting out
path.
of the PA phase.
Now you're in the path. That's awesome. Hey, I loved your boy, Bobby Gons.
Yeah, no.
I loved him. Oh, I got him endorsed yesterday at Valley State. He's heading up there.
Of course you
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I love that guy. I liked how much flavor he had. That guy was a fucking dope rapper. And he came, like, just even when he, like, came up to the program office, like, he just had a little swagger to him. I'm like, he's wise, he's changed, he's got, like, this cool little swag. Like, I liked him a lot.
Immensely talented. Immensely. He could have a career out here easily. He's really talented.
Bobby Gons, baby.
Bobby Gons, and that's why I call myself Artie Gons. It was
I love him.
You got a
Is he
pen on
younger
you?
than you?
He is.
How old is he? I mean, how much younger than you is he?
I'd say about at least 10 years.
I will fix this.
If not more.
Okay.
But we were really close. Just a way for Bobby to live on out here.
Marina, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Marina.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, no worries.
He's awesome.
We came
I
in
got him, bro.
separate cars.
Like, that he's now part of the
But he
family.
still gets lost.
He's now part of the family, bro.
Do you mind if I still
I was
read
able. I
his-
had my laptop. I was
his
able to
bio?
show him
Okay.
pictures with your mom up in Pelican Bay.
What do you say?
Yeah, he's like that is crazy. I showed him all the pictures of the laptop. I found you at the theater show we went to, or the thing we went to downtown. Showed him pictures of that. Doctor. Hey, brother. Dr. Garcia. You see Terry? Yeah.
And he's from San Jose.
Is he?
He's another
Bobby
San Jose
Gonzalez?
boy, yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Future LA resident like myself.
Yeah, let's get him down. Let's get him.
He's lost.
Oh my God, that's cool.
You know, GPS. We
Yeah, I just wanted to come share that with you.
Hey, have you met Terry before?
He doesn't do well. I don't know. I called him. He said, oh, he's here somewhere. But I came late because
All right, everyone, I'm going to try and get us started so we can keep on time. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Marina Bell. I am one of the Beyond the Bars Fellows. I'm also a doctoral student at UC Irvine in the Department of Criminology, Law, and Society. And I am really grateful to be a moderator on this panel. These folks very generously agreed to contribute their expertise and their knowledge about the issues that we've been talking about yesterday and today. And so I'm really grateful that they're here. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for coming as well. I'm going to start jumping right in, reading introductions. So I do have to say that Tyrone Hardison was going to be a panelist with us, and this is his wife who's taking his place. So thank you so much for stepping in.
that's your wife.
I'm going to go ahead and read the biography that he gave me. She's very much featured in it. Tyrone Hardison has been heavily impacted by mass incarceration since he was a child, witnessing 3 generations of family members being taken back and forth to prison. At 9 years old, he began his own journey into the lopsided world of mass incarceration. As a recent liberated lifer, he served 22 years on a life sentence. He's the co-founder of LEAP, which stands for Learn Everything About the Parole Process. Tyrone and his wonderful wife, Patricia Hardison, felt a need to empower and educate families and the community impacted by mass incarceration. One day while his wife was visiting him in prison, she broke down in tears and expressed feeling hopeless and helpless, and she did not know how to help Tyrone regain his freedom. Years later, after coming to better understand the parole process and what's required for transformation, Tyrone and Patricia revisited that hopelessness conversation. What touched them the most was the undeniable reality of how many other families were feeling hopeless and helpless as well. LEAP was created out of the necessity to empower and educate families to become part of the fight for their loved ones serving extended periods of time. Using their own personal experiences, Tyrone and Patricia share and assist family members in becoming advocates for their loved ones inside. They hold quarterly workshops at Chuco's Justice Center located in Inglewood, California. Tyrone's personal experience has helped him in regard to reentry, learning about what's needed and what's not. He's currently a peer reentry navigator network facilitator for the Department of Adult Operations. Part of his duties include mentoring and being a life coach to men who are reintegrating back into society. Through his experiences, he's able to guide them and help the transition be smooth. That is our first panelist. And then we have Terry McDonald, who I'm very, very grateful to have here. Ms. Terry McDonald has over 36 years of public service in mental health treatment facilities, state and local corrections. She began her professional career in 1981, serving as a mental health worker and supervisor in a variety of community-based mental health and drug treatment facilities. In 1988, she began an extensive and broad-based career in law enforcement, beginning with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, serving in various capacities and ultimately as the Undersecretary of Operations. In this capacity, she was responsible for providing executive direction and operational oversight of the state's correction system. Ms. McDonald has had the unique honor of having been responsible for providing executive oversight of the state of California's parole, prison, juvenile justice system, the County of Los Angeles jail system, and most recently, the County of Los Angeles probation system. With over 7,000 employees supervising over 38,000 adult and 7,000 juvenile probationers on any given day. Each of these systems are the largest of their kind in the nation, and she led them during fundamentally transformative periods. Thank you so much, Terry, for being here also. And thank you, Scott, for coming as well. Scott Budnick is the founder and president of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which provides a support network for formerly incarcerated men and women and advocates for fair criminal justice policies. He grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, graduated from Emory University, formerly the executive vice president of Todd Phillips Green Hat Films. Scott executive produced many successful comedies, including the highest grossing R-rated comedy in history, the Hangover series. Outside of film, Scott is a fierce champion for young adults in need. He's a teacher and serves on the board for Inside Out Writers, an organization that aims to reduce juvenile recidivism through creative writing by providing a range of services for currently and formerly incarcerated youth. For his work with youth in the criminal justice system, Scott was named California's Volunteer of the Year by Governor Jerry Brown in 2012. Scott currently sits on the board of State and Community Corrections and was selected to serve as a board member of President Obama's newly created foundation, the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. So thank you so much, Scott, for coming as well. So can you guys all hear me okay if I don't use the microphone? All right. I want to dive right into questions. So some of you, or all of you actually, have experienced the impacts and effects of Prop 47 and 57 and other recent legislative reforms surrounding reentry. And I wanted to ask you each how you would define the successes and failures of these recent reforms, not necessarily limited to Prop 47 and 57, that are intended to facilitate or improve the conditions of reentry. So whoever would like to take that first question.
So I'll start with what I think are the positives, and then I'd like to also mention where I think there's opportunity. I think the positive is the kind of de-incarceration behind drug-related behavior. You know, we spent the last 30 years locking people up when really drug treatment probably would have been a much better approach. Yet we continued with that approach while we watched the state prison skyrocket. You know, for years the state prison system ran about 25 to 30,000. At its peak, it hit 75,000 people. And you know, I was a correctional officer. When you're in there, the vast majority of people just need opportunity. You're talking about poverty, cycles of lack of opportunity in families, untreated addiction, the way that gangs can infuse once there's kind of a void created in your life. And so the positive of 47 is that it says, wait a minute, Let's stop creating these long-term felony consequences behind what really is a medical condition. I'm also a member of the recovery community, so I understand recovery personally and fundamentally. Having said that, I think that we also need to take a fresh-eyed look at it, because just like the tough on crime initiatives of 2 strikes and 3 strikes, they went on and on and on unevaluated for 20 or 30 years. It's not until people started saying, what the hell are we doing here, do people start to chunk away at it a little bit. There are parts of 47 that I personally find troublesome, and it's primarily around people that continue and continue and continue with the behavior kind of uninterrupted. And I don't think that in and of itself leads them and guides them to change. And the truth of the matter is citizens have a right not to be kind of terrorized by folks who, despite, won't move. And so that's probably the most controversial thing I'll say today. But I believe it fundamentally, and it's an area that I think we have to take a look at.
As a teacher, can everyone hear me? As a teacher in South LA and also married to a formerly incarcerated man, what it does, Prop 47, what it does, it really brings into light what the R in CDCR is, which is to rehabilitate. For many years, there were people that would go in and they did not have or were not given the proper tools to be able to be rehabilitated. I was speaking to one of the ladies in the audience, and I was telling her that the difference between one population of prisoners and another population, people that have a life sentence, is that they have to do work on themselves in order to be able to show the board and prove to the board that they are no longer a threat to society. So Prop 47, what it's doing is it's giving those tools to the people that have that medical condition, that need that support in order to be able to free themselves from whatever it is, whatever demons they have that they're facing with.
I mean, I'll speak more to 57 than 47. I don't know 47 as well. We wrote the juvenile piece with some others of 57, so I know that fairly well. I think what excites me the most about 57 is the fact that people can actually demonstrate change and be rewarded for that. Meaning, the fact that people can get milestones and now earn 40% off their sentence for going to education programs, going to vocation programs, getting drug treatment, doing self-help programs, it's huge. I mean, my biggest concern in the entire system, like I work with mostly young people and even some older lifers that have gotten out who are mostly, their issue was gangs. I've never met a nonviolent drug offender in my life. It's like a unicorn. I don't know what that looks like. Most of the people I work with committed violent crimes, and I love them, and I love watching them change. And I like seeing that now there's an incentive for them to speed up that process of change, and then there's a reward at the back end. And if you look at, the CDCR just released their new data reports, and if you look at all the lifers that Governor Brown has released, and all the lifers that Schwarzenegger, Pete Wilson, Dick Majian, and everyone else, Gray Davis, had released before, the rate of recidivism for a lifer, mostly who committed murder, and it's now 20, 25 years later, is 1%. It's the safest population to release in the entire system. And I'm sure Terry could tell you that from her experience, because they go through a parole board and they go through the process and they have to sit in front of commissioners and show that change. And the rate of parole, the rate of return for those who went out as juvenile offenders through the parole process in a 1 year period was 0.5%. So I really love the fact that those folks can now go to the board earlier, can come home earlier, and we have a few folks in this room. I see about 5 or 6 juvenile lifers who were supposed to die in prison who are home now that are sitting in this room right now. God bless. And I also feel like I think I may have to address and be a little unpopular to talk about what I think are some of the unintended consequences. And folks here may not like it, but you have to decide, and I guess I'm speaking into a room of what maybe I'll assume are a lot of progressives here, and I consider myself a progressive, but I do feel like we need to be smart. And I do feel like there are unintended consequences of 47, where as someone who, if you don't steal over $900, you're not arrested, and it's not a felony. So there's people that have stolen $890 35 times and been arrested 35 times. And because of that, you have the grocers and the retailers who have gone to the Correctional Officers Union, CCPOA, and said, let's do a ballot measure. And because of Prop 47, let's now do a ballot measure to roll back not just that theft provision in Prop 47, but let's look at realignment and see if we can roll back some of that. Let's look at Prop 57 and see if we can roll back some of that. Really, let's look at this nonviolent list. On the nonviolent list on Prop 57, rape of an unconscious person is considered nonviolent. Well, let's poll that with the public. That polls at about 98%. The public feels that rape of an unconscious person should be a violent crime. So now they know, the retailers, the grocers, and CCPOA, that they have something that polls very strongly with the people. And they have a lot of money, those three organizations. So with something that polls very strongly with the people and they have a lot of money, feels like we should start thinking about, okay, Prop 47 was awesome. There's great things that came with all these people that had records that should not have records, expunge all that. No one should have to live the rest of their life for that. But now let's look at the stuff that maybe was a little ill-conceived and we've seen over a few years now doesn't work. And let's agree to make some of those fixes before we get slaughtered because we went too far.
Yeah, it might be a little helpful to explain 57. Do you guys really understand the credit earning behind 57?
I think I'll explain it.
Everybody does. So when people are sentenced into prison, they get different credit earning schedules, right? So some are doing life without possibility of parole, life, and they may be serving 80 to 85%. Some serve 50%. While they're pre-57, while they're in custody, some groups have more credit earning ability than other groups. Those 80 and 85%ers, no matter how great their program was, they couldn't earn additional credit enhancements off their sentence. So there was really no incentive to do additional work. Plus, there's no research that says the amount of dosage or time in custody actually leads to better outcome. There is ample research that talks about programming in custody, education, vocational, substance abuse, anger management, with aftercare and support aftercare reduces recidivism exponentially. So it just made sense to say, why aren't we incentivizing with these 80 and 85%ers to get them engaged in the programs that really can help change their lives? We actually disincentivized them. And I have a saying, which is, hopelessness is a very dangerous thing. So that 57 creates that kind of hope. 47, the best part of 47, it says you don't have to have these long-time collateral consequences behind having a felony. So there's a lot of great stuff with it. But again, you heard me say earlier, I'm kind of with Scott, that we can't just say, well, everything was perfect, and then what happens in public policy is, if you've been around long enough, the pendulum swings, and it always seems to overreact if we're not thoughtful and deliberate and research-based.
So part of the conversation that has been going on in this conference, and particularly yesterday, for those of you who were here for the keynote, is a conversation about the limitations of reform as a way of correcting the system. And we're starting to see increasing arguments in scholarship and in activism for the notion that what we need is not reform, but an entire overhaul of the criminal justice system. So I'd like to know, to what extent do you think Prop 47, 57, and these other efforts around reentry are reproducing or eliminating the problems that propel mass incarceration forward?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like doing notes. Well, I'll speak on what it has done for my husband, because his life of crime began, as Marina said, at the age of 9. So if we don't have these programs in place, 57, he was already out. so he didn't really get to benefit from 57. But 47, if I'm not mistaken, he has to wait a certain amount of time before he can even take advantage of that. But for the ones that do have the crimes that do fit into that, it's great because they're able to put closure into that chapter in their lives. And it seems like they keep getting retried every time that they have to disclose and every time that they have to put it on paper. So if they're able to put closure into that chapter because they have served the time and they have done things to better themselves, then that's a benefit. But that comes being able to move on into life, being able to live a normal life. So for me, it's beneficial to have these programs.
I don't remember the question. I was
Okay.
listening.
I'll read it out again. So I was mentioning that we're starting to see increasing arguments in scholarship and activism for the idea that what we need isn't reform, but an entire overhaul of the system. So what are your thoughts on the idea of reform versus a whole system change, and to what extent do you feel that these recent legislative efforts are perhaps reproducing the problems that are propelling mass incarceration forward rather than eliminating them?
The penal code is a mess. If there's any lawyers in the room, the penal code's a mess of different statutory laws that have been passed over time. California, the nation is watching California because California is moving in directions in which it's making people uncomfortable, right? It's making people uncomfortable, but it's holding, right? It is holding. Recidivism's down. The last CDCR recidivism report, it's down. You have people now, before AB 109, about 20 people in California said recidivism. Policy wonks, corrections experts, you said recidivism, you said it all the time. What's going to reduce recidivism? 20 people. Now you have tens and thousands of people in California saying revidivism. Right? They can't quite pronounce it, and they don't necessarily know how to define it. But you have a lot of people talking about it. I don't know, to be honest with you, whether you could actually get a legislature to do a zero-base approach towards criminal justice policy. It probably makes incredible sense because some of the things that Scott mentioned really are very real, like rape of an unconscious person. I mean, that's pretty shocking, but nobody ever wants to unzip anything because if you unzip one area of the penal code, it opens this floodgate. So I think California is leading the nation. Frankly, I think we'll learn more as it goes. This is a seismic shift. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the change of administration. I mean, you've had a governor who has done amazing work in a very short time around reform. I don't know what will happen as administrations change. Will there be a rollback of that? I think time will tell. And, guys, it just takes one horrific crime and, people knee-jerk react instead of stay evidence-based, it gets to be problematic. So,
I think in terms of our sentencing laws, I think these reforms have really been good. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think there's more to do. In terms of prison itself, I feel like we need to do a little bit of a wrecking ball. In terms of sentencing laws, I just feel like everything that's happening, Governor just signed 9 pieces of a law that a lot of these folks in this room actually were in Sacramento advocating for. So juvenile life without parole gone, youth offender parole now up to age 26, sealing of records for juveniles, lots of great stuff happening. Anne Marie Schubert, who is the very conservative district attorney of Sacramento, came to a restorative justice event we did in Lancaster Prison and said, you know what, I don't really feel like aiders and abettors who weren't the shooters should be doing the time that they're doing. Like, I, as a district attorney and as a very conservative district attorney, would push a bill to give them a chance of parole after 5 or 10 years, rather than having to do 25, 50, 75, 100 years. And so I feel like there's some real discussion happening with the governor and the DAs and others, but also we have these threats that I mentioned before of some unintended consequences that could lead to a huge measure that would swing the pendulum back in the other direction. So on the sentencing front, I think things are moving in the right direction. I'd love to hear Terry's opinion, having spent so many years in CDCR. I do feel like Scott Kernan, who's running the department right now, is really doing some really great stuff. Family visits back for lifers, Prop 57, a lot of different custody changes, more programs, more education. Now all 33 of 35 prisons now have in-person college education happening on site in the prison. So a lot of real positive momentum. I think where I would take the wrecking ball is to culture. I think as anyone who's spent time inside knows, if you have a warden and a captain who are progressive and believe in rehabilitation and believe that the people in their care are human and can change, then you have a culture within that prison, barring some correctional officers that may not agree with it. I've seen Kern Valley Sea Yard, which used to be a murder a week, a dynamic captain named Dan Goss and a warden named Martin Bider and a chief deputy warden named Christian Pfeiffer told this captain said, I believe in rehabilitation. I believe in all these men on this yard can change, and I want to help them change. And that warden and that chief deputy gave him all the tools to do it. And it now programs like a level 2. And it's a level 4 180 because there was a dynamic leader and there was support for him to bring in every program under the sun and believe that people are human and that they can change. But the flip side is the case in a lot of places where you have a captain that at best is lazy or at worst does not believe that people in his care are human. And you may not have wardens or people that agree with rehabilitation or believe that that is a huge purpose of their mission. And you have the opposite happening. And when people are dehumanized every day and they look down at their prison-issued uniform and it says CDCR prisoner, and it doesn't say great dad, college student, college graduate, and all the things that we want them to be, then it just reinforces everything else and nothing changes. So I would, if I was going to look at the more wrecking ball approach, I would look at how to really shift prison culture in a huge way. And I'd love Terry to speak on that as well because she lived through it.
So yesterday I had the opportunity, so now I have halls and camps, and yesterday I had the opportunity to go to a couple different places. And the culture of the places were fundamentally different, right? The employees' understanding of their role as a rehabilitative partner is different, right? I grew up in corrections in which I had 110 level 4, and you know what a level 4 is? High security, mentally ill men by myself. Overcrowded, I was at Linear Design, California Medical Facility. That was one of my prisons. I was just trying to get through my damn day, right? I mean, the conditions under which I worked were unacceptable. You know, I fed in a lockup unit, open bar lockup unit in green slickers. I fed, they gassed, I went to the next place in my green slickers. Imagine the trauma that I experienced, right? Not driven by anything other than the state overcrowded, underprogrammed, undertrained, underappreciated. That's how I grew up. And so that could have framed my understanding of my job, right? It could have framed it. And it did for a while, you guys. It did for a while. I mean, I'm running to riots. I mean, the inmates had weights. They were massive. I was scared to death. And they were bored to death. And it was us and them. And that culture's ingrained deeply. And it's one in which can change, but it takes time. It also takes a recognition those jobs suck. They're hard, right? You want to go home. You're not going home on Christmas, and you're not going home on New Year's. So you have to invest not just in the inmates or the juveniles, but the employees, because employees can't give away what they don't have. They cannot give away, and you can't expect somebody that's getting ordered over all the time or dodging gassing or whatever it is to have a little joy in their hearts. Where you see there's joy in their hearts, where you see there's real partnership between the CBOs and the providers and the mental health treatment and the inmate clients, right? Everybody's working together. The staff feels so much better. But it takes a lot to get them to do that. You know, and yesterday I was walking around and staff were saying, we got to have more consequences. And I'm saying, I'm praying for the day when you say to me, we got to have more programs. We got to have more training, right? But they have to have more training. You know, the correctional officers, nobody ever trained me in trauma-informed principles. Nobody ever said, this is where these folks come from, and this is what's created this behavior, and this is their fears. Had somebody spent the time and taught me about that, I might have found my way a little bit sooner. So I don't know. I agree with Scott. We have a lot to do, but I also know we have a lot of great people.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
May I add something? And Terry mentioned trauma-informed, and that's absolutely true. But at the same time, it's important for the families as well, and I'll speak from a family's perspective, because our men and women are doing so much work on themselves on the inside. They're doing self-help. They're doing all these programs to help them understand who they were and why they did the things that they did. At the same time, it's important for families to understand, because time goes on, and if our loved ones come home and their families are still doing the things that they did 20, 30 years when they were put in prison, then the likelihood of that person wanting to be around their family to be successful, they're going to be successful because they already know what their triggers are. They already know what their coping skills and strategies are because they've worked so hard on themselves. But to want to be around their family, it's decisions that they have to make. When my husband came home, those are choices that he had to make. We grew up in the same neighborhood. My mother happens to live in the same house that we grew up in, where he was from that gang and so forth. So the choice is, as his wife and support system, we don't visit my mother as often as I'd love to. I can go see her on my own, but it's important for families to also understand what they have to do on their end, because it takes a village, and we're all a part of that village. So when families are ready to have their loved one home, they have to ask themselves, and what have I done to prepare? What have I done with myself? If I still have the same attitude, if I still have the same mentality, then we're going to clash, because my loved one has done so much work, has rehabilitated themselves, and we're just not going to see eye to eye.
Thank you so much. So the theme of this conference is the end of mass incarceration. So I'd like to ask all of you, what does the end of mass incarceration mean to you, and what would that look like?
I mean, to me, it looks like, I know this saying is a little cliche, but I just think it rings true. It's like prison should be made for who we're really, really scared of, not who we're mad at. And I think that, I would absolutely, anyone who we're just mad at because they committed a crime, but we're not scared of, let them out right away, and let there be enormous resources in the community, and enormous treatment in the community, and a reinvestment of all those savings that we would have into treatment, love, support, mentorship, housing, job training, parenting, whatever anyone needs, healing. And for those that remain, make everything behavior-based, make everything change-based, and when someone makes those changes and is a changed individual, don't keep them another 10 years or 20 years or life without parole. I don't believe there should be life without parole. I believe that everyone should get a look to see what happens. I don't believe in 25 to life enhancements on top of 25 to life sentences. I believe everyone should be given a look and incentivized, and I think what Terry said about hope is probably the best line of the panel so far, that everyone should have hope. Everyone should know they're loved. Everyone should have opportunity. Everyone shouldn't have to live with these consequences for the rest of their life. And to me, that's what an ideal system looks like.
And mass incarceration. Is that something that can really happen? I teach at an elementary school, and our school has been identified as trauma-informed. So the majority of my children, my students, at some point in their lives have been exposed or part of some form of trauma. I know when children's parents are incarcerated, because they will say things like, I miss my dad, I'm going to go see him this weekend, or I went to see him. And really, it's generational. And we need to, as Scott said, have programs, healing, lots of healing, not just for the individuals that are in prison, but for the families as well. As one of the organizations, Place for Grace, says, hashtag, they're still dads and they're still moms. So how are we going to end mass incarceration? When we allow our dads to be dads and our moms to be moms and bring healing with that. When we allow our children to understand that there's avenues that they can take, that there's other routes that they can take. And when we bring resources into the community, we should take preventive measures. Start at the elementary, start at my school. I've done so much to try and bring that healing. And the reason that as a teacher I stand out from others, it's because I'm married and I'm at the prisons and I understand and know and see what goes on with incarceration. So when we bring healing for them at a tender age, we're going to stop the mass incarceration.
You know, Sweden is one of Sweden, Norway, they're more progressive correction systems. From the design, they're more normative design. You know, it feels a little bit more home-like. And so our new campus, Kilpatrick, I'll do a big shout out to LA County that just invested with money from the state in creating a new juvenile facility that if you have to keep kids in custody, it's more like a school, more home-like. Kids wear their own clothes than, say, Central Juvenile Hall, which should be abolished and it's one of my top goals to ask the board to replace that facility with the treatment center. I don't even know why I got up on a tangent there for a shout out. Oh, Sweden and Norway. Their recidivism rate runs about 20%. And it runs about 20%, not because of necessarily the magic in the facilities, right? Because they do great work. To be a correctional officer in those nations, you spend 2 years in training, right? It's a highly valued career. Correctional officer in California, you think that that's a highly valued career? No, right? And so, you know, in Sweden and Norway, it's a highly valued career. I mean, people are revered in those roles. But maybe more importantly, is society has a recognition that people serve their time. Employers understand people serve their time. You know, the social net understands people served their time. And until we can get to a point where we're starting to educate the public, and 47 is a little recognition from the public that voted for it that people deserve second chances, but they don't necessarily believe that with folks with violent. And that's why I love Scott so much because Scott takes them. Right?
I love you too, Terry.
Yeah, he takes he takes the cases that other people won't. You know, I was with a CBO this week, and a CBO this week, well-known CBO, said, "Hey, listen, we got to work with your probation staff because they keep giving us referrals of the wrong kind of people." Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, well, we must be referring the soft cases. No, they said you're referring people that aren't ready, and we don't know how to fix that. So there's a lot of work. It's not just, it's my way of saying it's not just the correctional officers, it's not just the probation staff, it's the schools, you said it, it's the schools, it's the family, it's the employers, it's the CBOs, right? It's mental health that says these are your problems. These are your inmates, not our clients. And so I think we have a lot of work left to do. If Governor Brown was here, I suspect he might say that he would relook at indeterminate sentencing. From determinate sentencing. So when I said it ran about 25 to 30,000 the California prison system for decades, it's because the Board of Parole Hearings could make decisions to do releases when it got full. And so it incentivized good behavior. I also would take a very strong look at parole and probation, right? There was a law before 109 called non-revocable parole, which low-risk folks on supervision could not be returned to custody for technical violations of parole. California has one of the highest recidivism rates in the nation because we're one of 3 states in the nation that everybody's under supervision. And I'm pretty sure that if somebody, I'm pretty sure that if somebody came into your house, there's probably something in your house that you could be revoked for a technical violation of parole. So I think that's another area about how do we figure out how to let folks go. Let them be, right? Focus on your highest risk people, right? Provide support to your highest need people. And the folks that are doing the deal and doing okay, figure out how to way to loosen the reins a little bit. And then also figure out how to not be so rigid about who can come and help, right? The people that got the tattoo on their forehead, how you doing? Talking about helping, how are you? The people that got the tattoo on their forehead, those are the people that once they've done the deal and they've done the work, they ought to be in helping. Roll up your sleeves and get in here and help. So that's my thought about it.
Thank you very much. So each of you has a really unique perspective on the subject of reentry and mass incarceration in general. So I'd love to hear from each of you about what type of specific recommendations you have for how the public might get involved in supporting the reentry process.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Trying to get Tyrone here, so. Go ahead.
Also, we had a news flash. The Governor Brown just signed AB 1008 to fair choice.
Ban the box, baby.
We've got unruly audience members. It's a good thing you're not on parole. Back to the Hooskow. Back to the Hooskow. But there's a good example, though, right? There's a good example where you have to mark a box that I've had a felony and nobody's even going to interview you because you had a felony, right? Begin to roll back. What could the public do? Demand for the rollback of those collateral consequences, right? And don't be so NIMBY, right? We want to put a treatment program in your neighborhood. What do you say? Yeah, let it happen. What do people say? Oh, no, right? Beginning to educate people, right? And start to think, beginning to be an employer of choice for people that have been through the system. Mentor, mentor, mentor. Dr. Edla says there's much emerging research about the role of mentors when people get out. And I'm going to bet about everybody in this room serves as a mentor to people that have been in the system, right? People need hope. They need somebody to hold them by the hand. They need people to talk to. If they don't know how to do the deal, they need somebody to say, here's how you do it. Here's how you do expungement. Here's how you do record sealing. Here's how we go to college, right? Let me help you find a job, right? Right.
You want to go?
I can go. Terry mentioned mentor, mentor, mentor. Well, we've all heard that it takes a mile or walk a mile in my shoes and then you'll understand. And I know for my husband, he mentors. He's actually a facilitator for the Department of Adult Parole Operations. So what he does is, because he's walked a mile in their shoes, he understands firsthand what goes on with transitioning back into society, things that I won't be able to understand. At one point, he didn't even think he would see the day of light ever again. So now he's home and everything intrigues him because for many years he didn't get to see sunsets, he didn't get to be out in the dark, he was deprived of, by choice, many things. So now that he's home, he's able to go out, do whatever he wants. And there were times when he would be fixated on a tree. And I'm thinking like, maybe something's wrong, he's upset or something's going on. But it's those things, everything that we tend to take for granted that they enjoy. So me personally, I'm learning how to live through his eyes. I'm learning how to slow down because we're busy, busy, busy. We have 10,000 things to do, and they're coming home, and it's overwhelming. Technology is not the same. When he went in, it wasn't the brick phone. It was something after the brick phone, but it wasn't a flip phone either. They had beepers back then. So now you have smartphones, and you can watch movies on your phone. You can do everything on your phone, and they're not used to that. So he's able to help them take it slow, take it easy, and understand and validate. I won't be able to validate them if they're feeling a certain kind of way because I haven't experienced that. I'm so busy with so many things going on. I have to lesson plan, I have to do this, I have to do that. I have an appointment, whatever's going on in my life, that it's overwhelming for them. So when they have people that they are being mentored by, someone that has been there and that understands and knows their pain, it's so much more easier. That's where families also come in because families also need to be mentored. We get into our disagreements because I walk fast, he walks slow. I want things now, he likes to take his time. So it's really good to have those support groups, and it's up to us to create them in our community, to be able to bring those resources, to be able to understand what our needs are as well, so that we can be more successful with our loved one at home as well. So it's mentoring, it's allowing to have these programs in our community and being a part. Families need to be involved and need to be a part of it so that we can understand. And it's like anything. If you lose someone, you go to a support group for people that have lost someone. If you're on a diet, you go to a support group for people that are on a diet. So the same thing with people that are coming home and transitioning into life. We need those programs, those support groups, to help them and to help us understand and be able to be more successful.
I mean, I think they covered most of it. I would just like to just put an exclamation point on the role of those who were formerly incarcerated in the healing process and in the mentoring process. We just got, funny enough, 7 former lifers at ARC. We just got a grant from CDCR to hire them to come back into the system, and they spent 20, 30 years of their lives incarcerated in prison, and now they've agreed to go back into prison 4 out of 5 days every week to lead groups, to mentor, and to show the way to a lot of our men and women that are still inside. So they, every week, are in Kern Valley, Corcoran, Calapat, Centinela, Ironwood, and Donovan, and they see, I don't know, maybe 500 men a week that are in all these groups: Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous, board prep, youth offender mentoring, AVP, all these different things that are happening in the prisons, run by ex-lifers who now have brown cards, state IDs, to go into the prison as free staff and then leave at the end of the day. And the feedback I've gotten, funny enough, not just from the men and women inside the prisons about how incredible these groups are because they're led by someone that was once in their shoes, but the calls I get every day from captains, from officers, from sergeants, from lieutenants, who at first are like, I don't want these ex-inmates on my yard, and are now like, these guys are the real deal. I love these guys. Hey, can you tell them I want to take them to lunch? And so I just feel like I'm watching culture change on both sides, right? On the inmate side and on the staff side. And to me, that's the beauty of all of this, as everyone begins to change and just have better lives.
So I had a question on here that had been intended for Tyrone, because one of the goals at the forefront of this conference was to provide a voice for people who have had experience with the system and who are formerly incarcerated. I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway and ask you guys to give your input on the question, and then I'd love for any members of the audience who have had that experience to answer that as well, and then anyone else who'd like to make comments. So the question is, have you noticed a discrepancy between your needs as a returning citizen and the services provided? If so, what needs to be done to bridge this gap?
So I have quite a few friends in the audience that could much better answer that question than I could. So I hope they'll have the courage to help me learn from their experience.
I agree. I think you would absolutely be the best to answer this.
Okay. So one more time, what are their needs? And
Is there a discrepancy between their needs and the services that are being provided right now?
Well, when he first came home, there weren't as many programs available for him. There weren't as many resources. There was Friends Outside and a few other organizations, but their needs are greater because it's more than just food and shelter. It's learning skills, given opportunities, and also at their pace. Because as I mentioned earlier, I walk fast, he walks slow. At UCLA, he's at USC. He just texted me and said that he's at USC. So little things like that, patience for the family above all, a lot of patience. So it's giving them, they were given the tools and resources to understand and to rehabilitate, but giving them tools and resources to now reintegrate back into society, to be able to be productive members in society. I know that there's other programs that are starting to build Project Rebound, where they have for colleges and things like that. But like children in school, not everyone is made for college, so we need to have programs for them where they can have a trade and they can be able to learn a trade, or they can have job readiness and go, because they're ready to, they feel they're ready and want to go back to work and be providers. So it's being able to have the things, the tools, skills that they need in order to be able to be successful. Not all of them come home to families. Some of them have lost their families in their decades of incarceration, so they come home and the organizations become their families. So not all of them have a place to come home to. And some of the transitional housings that are available, they're great. However, some of them have a time frame that they can stay there. So they need to have programs, they need to have job readiness, they need to be given skills so that they can be able to get back on their feet and be successful, because they want to be successful. Anybody wants to be successful as long as we're given the tools.
I'd like to add to that too. I think one of the hardest parts is, I'll give an example. Governor Brown came to LA Trade Tech College to sit in a room of 200 lifers who had gotten out. And he said, I want to hear from you guys. And for an hour, all they did was thank him and cry. And he said, okay, thanks for all the thanks, but I'm sick of being thanked. Tell me what's wrong and what I need to fix. And for an hour, all he heard from them is, we're lifers. We spent 20, 25 years inside. We haven't had a substance abuse problem in 20 or 25 years. We ran every drug group inside. And now you're putting us into cookie cutter transitional housing that are drug rehabs where I'm spending every day talking about an issue I don't have, where I need life skills. I went in at 15 and came out at 45, and I need to figure out how to go on a job interview. I need to be able to leave to do these things, but you're keeping me here to do this stuff that I don't need. And the reaction of CDCR, the system, was to put out an RFP for housing providers that didn't listen to one word the lifer said. They're like, okay, this is going to be lifer housing, but you have to house the lifers with the sex offenders, right? Also, you need a conditional use permit for it, even though most of these places don't have conditional use permits, because it makes it impossible for them to be able to even open. And you don't need them if you're not providing licensed drug and mental health services on site. It included all these things. You need a chef that's going to prepare. Some of these places don't need chefs that are preparing X number of meals a day. And so no one bid on it. So the state has not found a way. So you have parolees getting out. If you're not a lifer, but you need housing, the state's not doing anything. So then they come back to the counties. And when I asked Terry McDonald, well, can you guys, since it's LA County, but even though you're not supervising them, can you pay for their housing? Probably not. Well, if probation can't pay for someone on parole's housing, is it the county's responsibility? This person came from the county, is being returned to the county. The state's not stepping up to help them. So are they not ours anymore because they belong to the state? If they're coming out of the probation department, well, they need to be on SB 678 because that's where the funding is, and they have to be an adult felony probationer, but this one's on AB 109, so he can't get funded because that. So it's like an all over, and she knows this. We've talked about it. We've talked about it many times. But literally, when the supervisors give us discretionary funding and say, if someone's formerly incarcerated and they're homeless, here's a bed for them, go do what you do best, then we do what we do best, and we fill that bed immediately. I now have 12 empty beds because the state won't pay for it and the county won't pay for it. And so that's, to me, that's the biggest gap right now, is the resources are out there, but it's so convoluted to actually be able to implement them.
I think that's one of those zero-based things we talk about, right? So the funding comes with all these rules behind it. And so where I want to be is you've got an adult supervision model. Doesn't matter what the funding stream is behind them. The real question is, what is their need and how do we fit those needs? You place them and then you figure out how the funding fits in there. We spend a whole lot of time looking at people based on a penal code section that provides the funding for them, which frustrates Scott unmercifully. The good news is we recognize it's a problem, and much like in recovery, you have to recognize there's a problem to fix it. The other good news is that the LA County Board of Supervisors created the Office of Diversion and Reentry. Right, LA County Probation, we just identified $187 million to be funneled through that. And so what ODR has is this menu of dollars. They have they have $40 million and $47. They have housing dollars under Measure H. They have AB 109 dollars. They have $678. So I think ultimately we'll get to a point of, hey, ODR, here's a referral of a client, find services, and then behind the scenes is the budget issue that finds the funding stream. So then Scott would say to ODR, I've got 12 beds. We say, here's your 12 clients, and then we figure out how the money works. And then, and I think probably a year from now, it will feel better for Scott, is my hope.
I have to wait a year?
Well, because ODR has to get infrastructure up. That's the trouble with infrastructures, right? They're hard to stand up. That is true in the CBOs as well. So we can say, hey, listen, we want to give you $3 million to have this fantastic program, and let's start next week. And the CBOs have to do what? Have to hire people. They gotta buy furniture. They gotta do curricula, and so things never go as fast as we want. But the good news is, I'm hopeful. A year from now, it'll feel a little bit better.
Thank you. So I'd love to open it up to the audience, not only to ask questions, but to make comments on any of the subjects or the questions that I've asked the panelists so far as well.
Marina, I can pass the microphone if the audience.
That would be great. Thank you.
You're good?
I don't think so.
Not everybody.
My name is Daniel Herron. I'm a member of ARC. Thanks, Scott. I also have a weekly podcast where I talk about reentry and society after service time in prison. And so I talk to men and women and professionals every week. And one of the overwhelming things that I hear, the men in particular and the women also, I'm also an addict in recovery, so is I feel like everybody's looking at me and I don't fit in. And so one of the things that I believe that, in my opinion, one of the things I think that organizations like ARC do is give people that feeling that they're a part of, right? Because when you're on a yard and you have to follow certain rules to feel like you're a part of, and then you're encouraged to do things that maybe are not even in line with the character of the person that you once were, and so you become someone that you're not. And then when you get out, having done those things, you feel like, not only do you feel like everybody's looking at you, I remember talking to someone, Ruben Lopez, that got out and said he sat down at Denny's and there was a fork, right? And that like freaked him out. There was a fork. He thought everybody in the room was looking at him, right? So, because in prison, everyone is looking at you. The inmates, staff, everybody, you're under a watchful eye all the time. So I think society, and in particular family members and loved ones and professionals as well, need to have a deeper understanding that we don't feel like we're a part of, and things like, and check the box and stuff like that, things that encourage us to actually assimilate back into society as members, that it does encourage us that we do fit in, right? Like, that I can go and my voice does make a difference, that my people respect me for where I've been, and finding, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but just that whole idea of feeling like you belong to something greater than yourself, right? Like, in society in general, because it's hard. And I had my 7-year anniversary parole like this week, right? And I just shared on my podcast, like, I have struggles still to this day, And a lot of it is because the answer to your question about the resources is, well, I don't even know the answer. It's yes or no. Like, no, the resources aren't there. And they may be there, but sometimes the information that they are available doesn't proliferate, right?
Daniel, if you could give one piece of advice as something that can change to make this assimilation better, to make you feel more a part of? What one piece of advice, what magic wand would you wave? What can we change?
Be honest. Like, just be honest with whoever it is that you talk to, and if you're someone that someone talks to, like, be open to whatever comes out of my mouth that's inside. Like, I know that seems stupid maybe, but like, just, like, for me, being able to have someone in my life that I could say, I'm thinking some crazy shit right now, you know, right? Like, you know, and that's okay, right? Like, because I don't act on those behaviors anymore, but just having a buddy that I could say, man, you know, I thought something crazy, that helps me feel a part of. So, like, not being afraid of, like, a thought that I may have. So, that honesty, I mean, an honest conversation.
Thank you, bro.
So my name is Kim, founder of Time for Change Foundation, CEO for the Center for Housing, Advancing Mothers and Projects.
That's right. Stand up.
And I just want to say, because I love Terry. I've had the privilege of being a formerly incarcerated individual and working on different projects and in commissions so I can interact with people in different professions. And I glean from power and strength. She has power and strength, so I can take that, add it to my coffer.
That's
What's
right.
not available in the community home for prison is a place for you. Where are you going to fit back into society? And so often we say assimilate. What does that mean when we was never a part of to begin with? We was only thought of as something to go into a system that could benefit from us doing cheap and free labor. We was never thought of as something to have access to resources, housing. Our communities wasn't thriving. Our schools wasn't performing. So when we come back out, we're trying to get back into something that we don't really want to get back into because it packaged us for the penitentiary. So therefore, I say that we have a mindset that we can create what we need. I started Time for Change Foundation in my garage, right? I have beds, and that I don't need a furnace to fill my beds because I know if it's a bed available, you belong in it. And what I know for the girls that I serve, because they like me, we want our children, right? We want our kids, and we want a place to get our kids back at. And sometimes it's not going back home. Most of our kids are black and brown people are in the foster care system because our family couldn't pass the background for our kids, couldn't pass the social economic status it takes, 2 and 3 bedrooms for our kids. So our kids be stuck in there ready for the next system. And if we don't come back out and reclaim our kids, it's going to continue on. And we have to heal. But where do you do that at if you're not a part of a SB 68 or AB 109 or a part of AB 900 realigned? Like, where do you do that at if you don't have a place of your own? And herein lies the intersection of class. Because those with means have an opportunity to at least land in a real bed. See, I don't put bunk beds in my housing program for grown women because grown folks don't belong in bunk beds. That was a jailhouse thing. Right? I'm not trying to benefit off of you coming home to see about the next dollar. This is a way of life for me, right? And so when I be in these spaces, in these rooms, and I hear my brother back there after 7 years, that is a sign of his experience that he's gone through to get here. When you recycle in and out over years, quickly, you don't have the same experience after you did 25 or 30 years and coming out. You come back out to a new world, so it's having an understanding and making a place for folks to come back to. And you don't got to fit in. Create your own space, and we're going to join you in it. How about that?
Hey, by the way, I started ARC in my garage, so we're on to something. And by the way, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook in his garage, too. So there you go. Come on.
My name is Rodney Brown, New Life, Global Development. We are the landlords in the community that are looking at how can we get workshops to, we know how to house homeless veterans, we know about transitional age youth, but when it comes to reentry clients, and they've been sending me around developers. We built 37 units at 83rd and Fig. We're on track to build another 400 units. But most of them, we're working with Brilliant Corners and Lamp Community. And so we're trying to find a way to get educated on how to house, how to create that environment. And you said something perfect. A lot of people are telling me, Rodney, okay, you got an 8-bedroom house right now. You need to go and fill it up with bunk beds. And I'm like, okay, you just said something very, perfect. So not all grown people need a bunk bed. So how do we educate the landlords? I have people with single-family houses that are vacant saying, Rodney, I would house whoever, if you could educate me on how to make that happen and how to make it work. So how do landlords, property owners, and developers like myself get educated on how to create the right environment for them to have a place to come back home to?
So can I answer real quickly that? So guys, I think we'll have in front of the board here in the next probably 60 days or so, a request for probation to partner with foundations to serve as a community capacity building infrastructure. Because there's lots of people that want to help, but they don't know how to do it, or they don't know how to apply for contracts. We're also looking if there's a way that we can use foundations to maybe help get some of the money out to some of the CBOs that they haven't got the proven track record yet. They got the heart and the passion and the desire, but they need a little bit of help to get stood up. So if we can be helpful to you after this meeting, feel free we'll hand out some business cards if that would help. Connect you to people. I don't know the answer, but we know how to connect people.
Great. We'll go Cheryl, and then we'll travel around the room this way, and we'll come back here. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Wilkins. So I have 2 points. One is that I just want to bring in to the room who we're talking about. We're talking about black and brown bodies. And so I haven't heard that part of the conversation earlier. And so that's one thing. The second thing, if we are going to think about change, we have to start with the language that we use. We have to see people as people. So when we start to call people inmates, ex-convicts, that sticks with us, and that exasperates, how we feel about ourselves. I'm formerly incarcerated. And so if somebody sees me as a person who was incarcerated, who's about changing her life and changing the life of a family and community, said that would uplift me a little more. One more comment I need to make, and then I'm scared of, because Scott, you mentioned that, we need to lock up people that people are afraid of. Well, white women are afraid of black men. They clutch their purse when they're around. So we need to be careful about saying that, people are afraid of black people, And so I'm scared of that. Okay?
I feel you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Monique Relas. My mom was incarcerated when I was 5 years old, so that led me to be sent into the foster system. When she got out, she was told by my social worker that she had to have housing, a job, and basically to be able to take care of us in order to get me back. There were no resources, so when she came out, she wasn't able to get a job because she had a record. She wasn't able to get a house because she had no money. So that meant I stayed in the foster system. And that not only affected her life, but that also affected my life. And with that, I went through in and out of juvenile hall. So it's not just about somebody coming out from being incarcerated and not having any resources to get their life straight, but it also affects if they have children and they can't get their kids back, because now it's not just affecting their life, but it's also affecting the child's life. Mm-hmm. And I went from being in foster care to being in foster homes that were abusive, from having foster dads that were just not treating me right, to going to be homeless, because I'd rather be homeless than to be in a foster home that I didn't feel safe in, and only because my mom wasn't able to get the job or a home to get me back. And by the time she was able to get her life together, it was already too late. I had already had a record. I had already dropped out of school. I was in and out of juvenile hall. And that affected my life. I'm 19 years old and I barely graduated because I finally got it together.
You graduated.
So it doesn't just affect the person who's incarcerated. It affects the person if they have a family. I'm barely having a relationship with my mom, and she did finally get it together. And I didn't get to get raised by my mom because she didn't get that help financially to get the job that she needed to get me back, and she wasn't emotionally or mentally stable to even be my mom. So it wasn't about financially, but it was emotionally and physically. So the resources are really, really important to any adult that's coming out from being incarcerated, because you don't know if they have a family to get back to, or if they have kids to try and get back at them. And it just makes it harder. So yeah, that just has a lot effect on just the youth as well. Thank
Wow.
We're going to go Philip, and then here, and we'll work our way back up. Oh, let's make sure it's on real quick.
All right, Philip.
Feel the thrill, baby.
All right. As you all know, my name is Philip, and I'm a part of ARC, which is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. One of my points is post-incarceration. It's like, you know, we have a lot of these laws that have been passed, and we know there's numerous people that's coming home. So the question is, like, what do we do to help these individuals after being incarcerated? Because they're making a transition. And sometimes you have people, it's like, I had a plan when I was inside prison. And then once I get out here, get through the gates, I realized that my plan is not aligned with how society is now. And you find a lot of people where they become stagnated. They put themselves in a position of a standstill. And it become like a cultural shock thing for some. And then they go backwards because there's not the opportunities there, or everything that they envisioned that they was going to do, they can't do. So that's one of my things. So the opportunities, as Ms. McDonald was speaking on, was, you know, if you don't give a person the opportunity to go forward, then they're going to go backwards. As I see with some of the people that go to school with me, I know a couple of people who have graduated who were formerly incarcerated, and that is still stigmatic. It is blocking them from getting certain type of jobs that they actually qualify for because they have the education. And it's like, I have this education, but I don't have the opportunity to use it the correct way. So I've seen people return to some of the areas in which they grew up in. And now if you don't give me the opportunity to use my education positively, now I'm using it in a negative way. Now I'm just a smart criminal. So I mean, so the opportunities, again, post-incarceration, how do we help these people after that? Because I think that's like one of the biggest problems. A lot of us have the ambition. A lot of us want to go forward, but just the opportunities is not there. You know, that's resources and all, but it's just not there. And sometimes you can have a person become hopeless, and that's not what you want with a person who was at one time criminally minded, because it's easy to return to that. I mean, a lot of us are making the transition into what we're doing now, which is something positive. And it was hard for us to go from where we was at to where we are. And we like this, but it becomes like, if there's a will, there's a way. And if you don't provide me with the proper way, I'm going to find a way another way. So again, post-incarceration, how do we help after the fact?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Ms. McDonald, that you talk about, my name is Karan Kim. We were asked about ending mass incarceration. You mentioned Sweden. I just came back from a trip from Sweden about a few months ago, and we went to Hall Prison, which was one of the 2 maximum security prisons in Sweden. And it's just their whole country's philosophy about it. I mean, one of the biggest things that Sweden does is they don't criminalize crimes of necessity. That is something that we do in this country, where if someone steals bread because they're hungry, brings them into the system, and then that just snowballs into something bigger to get more time to around more, become more criminalized. In Sweden, they look at if you had felt that you needed to steal food, if you had to, they realized, wait a minute, we as a society failed you, that you felt that you had the need to do this, and then that kind of leads into a lot of different things. It's the social services that we have. It's just, and whether it's foster care, whether it's just the social net. I mean, yeah, we have to kind of revamp the system, but it's not just incarceration. It's just the social net. And again, it's about class. It's about a bunch of different issues, something that Sweden gets right. So giving people opportunity. All their rehabilitation being evidence-based. They don't allow knee-jerk reactions like big crimes to something like in Norway when they had the guy who killed the high school. They didn't allow one huge incident to be a knee-jerk reaction to pass these laws. I mean, we all know why 3 strikes passed because of Polly Klaas. Knee-jerk reaction. We had all these crazy laws passed because one huge, horrible, horrible crime happened, and what do people do? they get scared and they vote these laws into effect, which really screws things up. And then unfortunately in California, because we have a proposition system, it just makes it worse. Luckily other states that don't have a proposition system, they don't have to deal with what we have to deal with, but because we have a proposition system, we can also fix it. So we need to make sure that the people see, look, this is what we did wrong. We reacted badly to incidents. We need to think smarter in order to get this to work. We need to have social safety nets. We need to have this. That's what's going to fix our system. That's what's going to end mass incarceration.
I'm going to keep passing the mic because it serves as like a talking stick, right? So we'll go with my sisters on this side, you still, and then up to Wendy.
My name is Sarita, and I'm with Time for Change Foundation. I just want to say when my mom, she was incarcerated when we were little. I didn't know my mom for 10 years. And through that, when they let her out, my mom didn't have nowhere to go for me and my brother. Me and my brother were with my dad. My dad threw me and my brother on my mom, and it was hard for her. And then when she did find a job, she found a job at Walmart. And my mom was gone 24/7. I was a latchkey kid. And you know what I mean? After a while, the system took us away from my mom. You know what I mean? And I felt like I followed in her footsteps. I went to jail. My brother is currently in jail doing 10 years. You know what I mean? And I pray to God that there's hope for him over a little petty crime. It was a petty crime. And they gave him 10 years for that. You know what I mean? I also have been firmly incarcerated. And when I got out, I didn't have nothing. You know what I mean? I lost my 5 kids because I have 6 kids altogether, but I lost my 5 kids due to that, due to the fact that I didn't have resources. I didn't have housing. All I had was this label on me. You know what I mean? This time around, I had Time for Change Foundation that was able to give me a stable environment and help me fight for my kid. It took me a year to fight for my son. And through that year, I did everything that they asked me to do. Everything. Every solitary thing, like 3 times, 3 different places that they told me to do. And no matter what, they still acted like they didn't want to give me that. And because I had a firm foundation, support, and everything with Time for Change Foundation, I was able to get them back. So if it was up to me, I would just say that, you know what I mean? After we get out, we need support. We need places to go. We don't need places and jobs that are going to give us underpaid jobs that's only going to pay for just a little bit of nothing. Like, we're still living in poverty. We need somewhere so we can be able to take care of our kids. You know what I mean? Our minimum wage right now is $10.50. For a person like me, that's not enough to pay for just a single home with 6 kids. So, like, you know what I mean? And because of my background, people look at me different. You know what I mean? So I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I do know that that's what we need. We need more things in our community to help us when we get out so that we don't be stereotyped, so that we do have places for women and children that do want to change and want to get their children back so that we don't wind up back in the same place, because I've done it and I've been there before. So that's basically what I'm trying to say.
Amen.
There's an author, if you guys know the author Nell Bernstein. Nell Bernstein, she wrote a book called All Alone in the World. She's one of the nation's most prolific writers on the impact for children of incarcerated people. If you're interested in that, she's a fantastic writer and does great work in this lane, and lane that's well underattended.
Hi, I'm Julie. I go to UC Irvine. I'm a 3rd year. And I have a question. So I was writing a list of things that I think people who get out need, like housing, jobs, support group, mental health, pipeline to higher education or trade schools, mentorship, even meeting with the families. And then I want to do something within my university, but this is a lot of stuff. And I would want to ask, where do you think I should start?
So in your university, you have some of the best criminal justice people in the world. Dr. Susan Turner, Dr. Val Janess. If you asked to meet with Dr. Turner or Dr. Janess, it probably would be pretty helpful. And they certainly, if there's some lane that you want to reach over to probation, they know how to find me. And other people may have other ideas, but while you're physically there, you are in the place where some of the brightest thinkers are.
Project Kinship.
There you go. And you just got some work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Garcia,
Hi, Dr.
member of ARC. let me see how I can frame this. So 20 years ago, I was in Chino as a parole violator, and I was a person who asked for help. So I had to do the triple CMS classification. So I had hit a crossroads. My mind was getting easy to go back to prison, to be in that mindset, to institutionalized mindset, believe it or not. My family background, my dad's a retired LA County probation officer, 34 years of service. I had a middle-class family. I have a sheriff, his first cousin, who's a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. Now, that was my family background, but I got into the prison mindset as a violator, and it scared me. And I'll never forget, and I'll just share this story that one of the administrators told me during classification. She said, don't you know, I had gotten out of fire camp. She said, don't you know that the Lord helps those who help themselves? And first of all, my mindset was just like a 4-letter word expletive in my mind. I was like, who is she to tell me that? So fast forward to 2004, I get out, I discharge in 2000. I'm a grad student at USC, School of Social Work, and I had to take another leave of absence because my alcoholism caught up with me again. And I've heard different people in this room talk about being in recovery. I've heard the reentry organizations that we need and all this support. And for me, reentry is like a period of time when you're on paper. So once you discharge parole, to me, I think gets your reintegration process starts. And for me, being out 20 years, I just separated from employment as an analyst at a public agency for 6.5 years. I had to go do the life scan, City of Laverne Police Department. I got hired, I was working there, and then I left. So here I am now today with my doctorate, applying for different positions, and I'm going, I'm looking at this position, I'm qualified in the community colleges at the one that I transferred from. And then right there, they're asking for it if you have a criminal history. So, it's kind of like I want to schedule a meeting with the president because I met her and I want to explain my story and explain to her, talk to her, because I'm not putting down the 15 misdemeanors that I have and the 2 felonies. I'm not putting that down I don't want to waste that time. So I didn't do it in my other job.
You put in work.
Yeah.
On both ends.
Yeah. So I guess the question, or maybe the thing that I think that as far as for those who've been out a period of time and the reintegration process, I have mentors. I have a fellowship that I can turn to, that people that have guided me to navigate those because the mind wants to play tricks on me. You're like, oh, man, this community college, I'm not going to get it because they're asking all this stuff. And that just seems to be like it's always going to be part of my life. But there's an avenue to redirect that and be positive and move forward. I guess maybe what I'm saying is like the fragmented systems that we have, it's kind of like we have the county positions, and you look at it, and then, the disclosure is, bandit box, whatever. But when you get to the record, the life scan, all that stuff, there's still there's a lot more work that needs to be done in the different sectors, whether it's a local government, public government, state government, or even federal government, for those that have the incarceration history. And with the education as well, because I'm qualified. And now it's more of like a discretionary, interview process where that person feels that I'm a perfect match. And that's the unknown that it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I know something will.
Do you want to call out which community colleges is that's?
Rio Hondo College. That's where I went. That's where I transferred from.
Well,
I was fresh out of prison, 4 days.
I'm on the community college board, so let's take that up the flagpole and let's get them. Let's get them.
Okay, we've only got.
Scott and I are working on a project together with some county partners, Internal Services Division, DHS, where we're actually talking about training people working with LA Trade Tech to actually have county jobs. So DHR's
careers,
with us. Careers
like
with the county.
Pension, health care, huge salary,
And our target
protected.
are people that have a criminal justice history. That's our target. So, I think LA County will lead in this one.
So first, I'd like to say hi to you, Terry McDonald. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. I graduated from the carpentry program at CIW, and you were at my graduation.
Hey!
I'm good, yes. So the one thing I do want to acknowledge is that I was in prison 20 years ago, and there was no services. There was no programs. And the programs they did have, it was Windows 95 at that point, and we were doing Word Perfect 5 or something. It was so out of date. It wasn't reliable to get any kind of skills. You know, so now I know that PIA, they're doing, in 19 months, I did 8 vocations. I completed a lot. I was in Sabra's Actors Gang. I work for them now. I'm a teaching artist. I want to talk about when we had a meeting with Brant Choate the other day, the Director of Education for CDCR. And one of the things that we are stumbling over is, okay, what are we going to offer? What kind of bachelor's program are we going to offer? And whatever it is, we want it to be broad. We want it to be over the whole state. So that way, if they get transferred from this facility to that facility, they can still pick up where they left off. So one of the discussions was education. Let's have an education. But how is that going to work when you can't teach? You can't do anything with a record. And so who was in the plenary this morning? Who was in the, okay, so do you remember those 48,000 blockers? Yeah, 48,000 things on a piece of paper that you cannot do because you have a record. So, I mean, I want to honor the fact that you've done so much work in LA County. You know, one of the things that I see as a block too is that we have all these low crimes now that, you know, the drugs and all this stuff that are now doing time in county. But what kind of programs are they getting? Because what happens is they do the less time and they get back out and then they end up doing a violent crime later. So let's start at the lower level. You know, let's start off and say, okay, what are we going to put into the county jails to get them rehabilitated? Because, you know, yeah, there's lifers, but usually there was stuff that happened, not always, but usually there was stuff that happened along the way where if they could have gotten some rehabilitation prior to the big crime that sent them to life or whatever, you know, what can we do for that? And what is your name back there? Where is he? Where'd he go? Oh, he's not in here. Well, I wanted to say from experience, honesty. You know, please do not be defined by your record. Get out and claim exactly who you are. You know, do not be ashamed of that. Get out and say, hey, this is what I was. Because you know what? Nobody has anything over you then, right? Get out and say, yeah, I just got out of incarceration. Look, I got an ankle monitor on my foot. Here I am at UCLA. I'm a UCLA fellow. But you know what? I did that because Annie Buckley, raise your hand. Sabra Williams, raise your hand. These are the programs, UCLA, Breon Baines. You know, I contacted these people. So claim who you are. Claim who you are because they're going to take you places. They're going to give you those opportunities. And the networking that I've had ever since, you don't even know how long I've been trying to meet you.
What's up, girl?
I have not been able to get out to ARC. I just met Norma at the mayor's house. So
where's the love? I was at the mayor's house for that.
But I missed you. Anyway, I just want to say, honesty, claim who you are. Do not be ashamed. Do not try to be a part of, because God put into you a special device. He put into you a special purpose. All of you. Claim it. Claim it. I'm not letting my incarceration define me anymore, period. And I'm not letting anybody else tell me who I am. Period. Wendy Staff, by the way.
Can I add something?
By the way, a couple quick ankle monitor stories. One, I had 2 people at the mayor's house for this women in reentry thing, both of whom were on ankle monitors. So I don't think there's ever been that many ankle monitors at the mayor's house in history. Second, I'm on the My Brother's Keeper board for President Obama, and we were graced by his presence at a board meeting last week. And he was talking about this hip hop summit that he did where J. Cole and T.I. and Common and Rick Ross and everyone came to the White House to talk about how they can get involved in racial justice. And he said in the middle of the meeting, there was this beeping sound. And he's like looking up at in the White House, when he's still in the White House, and he's looking up at the fire detector, smoke detector, everything. He's like, what is that? And Rick Ross is like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't charge my ankle monitor. In the White House.
Yes, I wanted to make one more comment, and I know that we're talking about programs, you know, at the jails and so forth. For me personally, as an elementary teacher, that's where we need to start. That's where we need to start. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the school to prison pipeline, and studies show speaking of based, if children are proficient readers by the time they're in the 3rd grade, the likelihood of them going to prison is very high. So last year, I took over a 2nd grade class, and it's sad to say I would measure my day by the amount of fights in the classroom. And our children are hurting. Our children are hurting in many levels. And even if you have, for me as a teacher, the best classroom management skills, even if I have all of that in place, that is not taking care of what their social emotional needs are. Those are the programs we need in our schools. The school where I teach at, it's Latinos and African Americans. And even within the school, we're divided, because with the district, we have English learners and EOs, or English only. So I teach English only, and there's even a division among the teachers. Most of the English only students are Black students. The English learners are the children that are learning English as a second language. There's even a division among the teachers. They do not want to mix our students to be in the same classrooms because they don't want to deal with the African American children. And it's sad. And it just makes me mad and pisses me off, because that's where the problem starts. So yes, we do need programs at the jails, we do need programs at the prisons, but we need to prevent. We need to have preventive measures, and we need to get them at the elementary level. I tell my students every day, there's this thing called school to prison pipeline, and I'm going to do everything I can within my power for you not to be on that train. So that's where we need to start.
Before you close, can I give some feedback of sitting on these panels many times in my career? I've sat here many times, and I've looked out many times. And I can tell you, over time, the anger is turning to hope, is turning to solutions, is turning to collaboration. 15 years ago, it was just anger, right? And so thank you, because it helps heal me, right? It helps me lead, and we can do this together, right? It's hard, but we can do this together.
That was a beautiful closing commentary. Thank
Yeah,
you so
let's
much.
close on that one.
Yeah.
I want to thank the people, everyone in this room, from the bottom of my heart. Like the panelists, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience. And the audience, thank you so much for just bringing your love and your enthusiasm and your vulnerability and your experiences to this conversation. I've heard a lot of people say that they're in recovery. I am also an addict in recovery. That's part of my motivation for doing this work. And yeah, just thank you guys so much. The intention of this conference was to, bring people together and to talk about solutions and to, begin to collaborate or continue collaborating. So please let this not be the end of this conversation for all of you guys in here. Let it be the beginning of relationships and all that. Thank you so much.
I do apologize about Tyrone. He ended up at USC.
No, thank you so much.